So, without any further ado, I will invite Minister Browne to join us. Hello, good
Hello,
afternoon.
hello. Good
Good
afternoon. Good
afternoon, and how
afternoon.
are you?
I'm pretty good, thank you. Thank you for having me on our economy, and let me use this opportunity to say a pleasant good afternoon to all your listeners. And I do believe that you have Facebook viewers as well.
Yes, we do. We do. We do.
Oh, good afternoon to you, Facebook viewers as
I
well,
don't know why
viewers and
you're
listeners.
you're robbing us of the privilege of seeing you, but I understand that you're going to attempt multitasking.
You see, the minute you said Zoom, I feel like I'm all zoomed out.
I figured as much, which is why we decided to try a different approach. I understand. I've been speaking to a number of
Mhm.
principals, and they were telling me that they're all zoomed out. So if they're zoomed out, I can imagine you.
Yeah, the
Um,
Zooms I've gotten to a point now.
well, Minister, as you are aware, this program deals with all the issues that impact on us, and we take a perspective from the impact on the economy. So, as the Minister of Education, I wanted to just get some preliminary thoughts from you in terms of the relevance of education to building our economy. This is our general introductory. We're not looking COVID specific now. We're looking at the relevance of education to a developing economy such as ours.
Well, I think, Peter, I think you asked a very important question. I think the comprehensive answer is the development and expansion, growth, revolution, or the changing or infusion of new ideas into any economy has fundamentally to do with the development of human capital. The human development of human capital in and of itself, the educational process. Now, when you break down the structure of education, the modalities to which education is delivered, I think you can simplify it into four four categories. So you'd have pre-K, which is it's in Antigua and Barbuda, infants, and then you have K to 12, you have tertiary, and then after tertiary you have training and retraining. Now, in for the development of any economy, it all depends on the developmental, the intellectual developmental levels of its people, and the more educated, and when I say educated, it doesn't necessarily mean in terms of the academic letters that accompany your name, but the more trained and educated a population is, the more diversified you will find an economy, and the more progressive and robust. In times of emergencies and crises such as now, it's the mental resilience of the people that puts them in a position to capitalize on opportunities, even when it seems like all is lost.
Excellent. Now, I want to take that still within the broad context and perhaps break it down to look at the relevance of a good foundation, because I know when
Hmm.
persons hear a discussion such as this, they begin to look at the top end, tertiary, and so on. But how important is it for us, for you as the Minister of Education, to ensure that as a nation we are grounded in our basic education?
Well, I think overall, not just me, but we all have such a keen responsibility to ensure that that progress continues, and as progress continues, one of the key foundations for progress is two of the key foundations for progress is ensuring that persons are fully well trained and exposed, and I would say secondly that persons are given opportunities so that they can showcase their intellectual talent. I think in Antigua and Barbuda, in particular, we may vary in terms of, well, as in all countries, we may vary about what should be done or how something should be done, but we all generally agree that persons should be educated. Now, when you look at kindergarten, for instance, previously, you used to have a situation where when a child comes, rather than putting them in him or her in a trained kindergarten system so they can learn the fundamentals of reading, writing, and arithmetic, and even a basic language at a very tender age before they start primary school. We generally send them to the grandparents or to whosoever is going to babysit because it's most convenient. So they're actually not getting any instruction. By the time they would have gotten to grade to form to the first grade now, if that child doesn't have the basic to start, it means that child is already a year and a half, 2 years behind of their peers who are coming in with some of the basics: letter recognition, color recognition, number articulation in an orderly sequence, some of the basic forms of communication that they would have. So that places a child at a disadvantage from a very early age. So from pre-K all the way up, it's necessary that we expose our students as much as possible to the very deep veins of education so that they can be as robust as possible. There's a chain of thought which says that, education should educate people for a purpose. There's also the fundamental school, which says that rather than educating students for a specific purpose or for an industry, what you do is have that connectivity. From an education perspective, the reality is even before COVID-19, the world was already shifting to doing more and more things online. And so it was necessary that we transition in that direction. Now with COVID-19, we find ourselves in a position where internet penetration, before I get to device penetration, let's talk about the internet penetration, where of the 290 million school children are out of school around the globe related to the COVID-19 pandemic. Less than 40% of them around the globe have access to reliable internet or data on any device. In terms of device penetration, of the 290 students, less than 20% of them have access to a computer.
This is globally.
This is globally.
Yes.
Now, those challenges are equally mirrored in Antigua and Barbuda. In 2015, we started in Antigua and Barbuda what's called the ABCDE Connect devices, whereby we purchased laptops for just about all the secondary public school students in Antigua and Barbuda. Now, I take it we have done a terrible job in terms of the pushback, in terms of the PR, but the reality is, since 2015, we have had a laptop for every public school student in secondary school. It has since been just characterized and simplified as the e-books. The e-book is only one program that's on the laptop, but it's a laptop. Now that we have had this crisis, more and more, the Board of Education has ramped up in terms of their outreach. And so I think the last time I checked the numbers, there were 760-something teachers who have laptops from the Board of Education. And these are the e-book, the ABCD devices, most of them containing the e-books. And you also have 5,600 and plus students, secondary school students, who do have devices. Now, that was the last update about a week ago. So I imagine for this week, it's even more. Because from Monday to Friday, from 9 a.m. to 1 p.m., anyone can go to the Board of Education if you've never received a laptop and you're in a public secondary school. You can go to the Board of Education, you can walk in directly, or feel free to shoot me a WhatsApp and I will send you the flyer so that you can get the number that you can call. My cell phone number is 464-2025. Again, 464-2025. And just put in the text, please send me the flyer so I can have information about the Ministry of Education laptops for public secondary school students. And we can update you on that. What the flyer also contains as well is information for you to be able to call your mobile provider. Because though there are devices, it doesn't mean necessarily that someone has internet at home. So with the arrangements that have been finalized between Flow, between the Ministry of Education and Flow and INET and Digicel, is that persons who are accessing educational websites, once they register with the mobile provider, they will be able to get zero-rated access to educational websites.
Slow down. So if today my child is home with me and I have internet in the house, I can register to go. I can call the internet provider and register.
Your internet or your mobile data provider.
All right, internet and or mobile data provider, And once I'm registered with them and they can verify that that is a bona fide school person in that household, they will get access to educational websites only.
The only educational website.
Okay.
There has been
Slow down. Wait. Slow down. I have a question related to that. So if I don't have internet at home or my mobile capacity is not sufficient to do it regularly, then what?
You see, if you don't have internet at home, then the other option is in terms of your mobile data, and that's why I said
no. That's why I asked you.
So you're saying if you don't have,
if I don't have data on my phone, or I don't have sufficient. Some people buy this $5 thing which doesn't last very long. Or I don't have internet at home. Right.
The radio type mobile phone.
Right. Then are there any options for those persons?
In those instances, what we have is that schools would have prepared physical packages, which is the old-time bulk, where you give students that package for them to be able to take home and work. Of course, in terms of updates, because we've been closed down for a while,
right.
That student, for instance, unfortunately, if they do not have at least a device, a Ministry of Education issued device if they're in secondary school, that student would be at a disadvantage.
Right.
This is where it now falls on the parents, because even though you're not receiving the formal curriculum for education, that's where it now falls on the parents for you to ensure that no matter what happens, your child continues to have access to read. Now, if you don't have computers in your book, every single house, computers in your house, or smart devices in your house, every house in Antigua and Barbuda ought to and must have some sort of reading material.
Reading,
So
yes.
So this is where it falls on you as a parent. And the truth is, there are one or two homes. We have identified them. We have also earmarked some of those homes to ensure that they continue to receive assistance from school meals if they're that vulnerable. And so those homes, we really call on the parents to do the best that you can under the circumstances.
Right.
Because the reality is, the period of that exists in education now, during this COVID-19, is called the delivery of education in the time of emergency. The most that parents can do, the most that students can do, the most that teachers, educators, and all the other stakeholders can do is to use best efforts.
Noted.
Under the circumstances. And so from time to time, parents reach out to me, because I give my number all the time freely. And I will tell them, listen, if you're having challenges, start resorting to utilizing written material that's in your house. And you take an active role in your child's intellectual development.
Okay. Now, I want to go back briefly to the actual device itself, because you said earlier that the ebooks are not the only things that are on the device. First, let me address the matter of the ebooks themselves. There has been concerns by some persons expressed that the ebooks may not currently be meeting the needs of the students as would have been a set of textbooks, the traditional textbooks. What would be your response to that?
Well, what I would say, Petra, there are some persons who like it, but who see there's opportunity for improvement. There are some persons who are diametrically opposed. But because you have the laptop, it's really your choice. If you don't find the ebook useful, then there are traditional texts that you can rely on, or you can turn to open source. The fact is that you have the laptops that are there. But I think what's more surprising, and I will share this with you, there was a parent, and I won't identify the school, but I was very anxious. Well, not just one, there were 3 parents who have reached out to me over the last 2 days and have indicated that they're interested in having the ebooks loaded on their child's private device, and if this is a possibility. Now, for the entire day, the Board of Education has been going back and forth and finding out ways in which they can get the ebooks loaded on persons, a student who is in private school or who already have their device, get the ebooks to be loaded on their device. And so, if some persons are not interested and they don't want it, the fact is other persons need it. But I think what's more important, though, the ebook is only one of many support platforms that are available for students to be able to learn. It's like going outside and someone says, you know what, It's like you, Peter. You're getting ready to go to an event. You look in your closet and you say, you know what? I have 40 pairs of shoes, but I don't like that red shoe, so I'm not going to go. I'm going to make as much of a stink as possible. Now, if you don't like that particular red shoe, put on another shoe and
I
keep
hear
going.
that. I hear that, Mr. Minister, but at the same time, the concern would be that the government normally provides a prescribed set of textbooks, or in this case, ebooks, to go along with the curriculum for the various subjects. And
There,
so
there are.
I just want to be clear so that because that is one of the questions that pop up from time to time.
Mhm.
The ebooks now would adequately provide the learning information to supplement the teaching in the classrooms.
Ebooks. Look at it this way, Peter. There are the ebooks, the physical old-fashioned text, because you will never find any teacher that turns to one particular text that the school is using and says this is enough. The reality is the ebooks is a textbook in a digital format.
Right.
And just like any other text, persons may have a preference for this style or they may not have a preference. But what it provides more than anything else, and I don't want to linger too long there because
No,
it
that's why
really
this is
takes
my
a,
last point
yeah.
before we move on,
So
but I just
what
needed to
it
get this out.
really does, it's a supplement or it complements other aspects or other platforms for learning that occurs. So you would have your regular textbooks. You have the ebook platform that's available on the ABCDE device.
Hmm.
You have Google Classroom, and you have other platforms. We have gone as far, especially during the COVID-19, to say, listen, if you come up with a platform that you find beneficial, as long as your school approves it and there's school-wide use or at least level-wide use of that platform, we will pay for the subscription for you to be able to do that. So the aim is not to limit teachers, but we're going to provide the opportunity as much as possible for you to utilize. Some persons, there's a teacher at TNK, for instance, that she has created her website and she has used open source material to supplement the information on her website.
Hmm.
And when she reached out, one of the questions was, can I use what I've created? Of course.
Okay.
So if you find something that is most beneficial as an educator, and any teacher knows this, no matter what takes place, when you go in your classroom, you close the door and you teach.
Hmm.
And since I was a teacher to this day, and even before my time, once you go in your classroom, you choose what works best for you and you teach your students. Because the reality is, your students don't really care what the policy is. What they care is whether or not you come to class, you're on time, you're prepared, and whether or not you're actually teaching. And
Excellent.
so I think when you look at that, and students fundamentally learn and develop with teachers who are just in tune with the subject matter that they're teaching and who are ready to open young, eager minds.
All right. So now my next question would be then relating to that before we go back to the general concept
Mm.
is there a general satisfaction? And I say general because, of course, we know that there will always be pockets of persons who would feel differently. Is there a general satisfaction that, given that it's an emergency situation and it's quote unquote a pandemic situation, that we have been able to service our students? Is there, would you consider a segmentation? No, you know what? Let me not put too many questions on layers. First question: are you satisfied as the minister with the overall responsibility for education that, given the limitations within which we've had to operate, that we have to some been largely able to satisfy the objectives of delivering education to our children?
I would say Teacher, the reality is there's some questions that they work well with a tidy, bundled answer for media, but in the real world, that crap don't work.
Is a real
The
well
reality-
answer I want. I don't want a tidy bundled
That's what I'm
answer.
telling you. I can't give you a tidy media answer to say
But this is
I'm
not a
satisfied.
tidy
This
media
is
thing.
this is what I can tell you.
Right.
I can tell you when you look overall at the process of education, especially in times like these, there's a constant reworking, re-evaluation of what you're doing to make sure that you're doing it right, especially at a time like this. To say whether I'm satisfied or not satisfied, no. What I'm more focused on is working with the team at the Ministry of Education throughout all our schools or stakeholders to ensure that we can continue to support the delivery of at least a basic form of education throughout the system. Even if conditions were perfect and we had all the money to do everything, let's say we were like Saudi Arabia as education system. I mean, they have just about everything that money could buy, and the
But Minister
reality is
Browne, we
they're not
know
satisfied.
this, which is why I'm
So to
asking you,
say, yeah, so
given where what we have. So given what we have,
it's a
given
continuous work in progress.
right, okay, I can
Yeah,
live with a
it's
continuous work in
continuous work
progress.
in progress.
Okay, I can live with your safe answer for now. Now, still on the matter of what I wanted to pull out in the tertiary institutions in particular, and in terms of your core policies that you have been developing in dealing with our tertiary institutions, what are some of the challenges that you've faced, that the ministry has faced?
If you could be a little bit more specific, because the challenges are ready, but at the same time, when you see challenges, it provides an opportunity for creativity as well.
All right,
And
so then perhaps I will craft it this way. You can raise the challenges, and where you can, share with us how we've been able to turn those challenges into positive opportunities. That continues to build our human resource capacity and, by extension, build our economy.
well, I think overall, when you look at it, if we were to just use the modality that most universities are turning to now in terms of the online delivery of education, it presents a challenge. At the same time, it presents an opportunity. It presents an opportunity from the standpoint, when you look at it, even if we to just look at our local community colleges here, that for now, they can open in terms of the number of students and from territories from which students are able to attend. So that it provides an opportunity for more and more online education to be able to take place. That's an exciting opportunity. When you look from other angles in terms of the diversification of the offerings or deepening of some of the offerings. So anybody now who is focused on studying anything in or around healthcare, education, IT, I say IT twice, finance, management, food security, energy, engineering, or any one of those key fields is interested in those. This is the right opportunity for persons to be able to get involved in those fields, primarily because in this COVID economy or this COVID period, I see those, and I agree with both Bloomberg. I agree with the economists when they come forward and say those are the areas in which they're encouraging persons. If you have not trained in them or you're not familiar with the areas, start looking into some of those areas now, because those are going to be some of the key fields going forward.
Did you mention health services?
Yes, of course.
Oh,
Yes.
okay. All right.
Health is number one. And when I say health, we're talking about all aspects.
Every aspect,
of
I
health.
agree.
Not just being able to deal with patients, but the machines that come in, who's going to service them? And even now you find persons across even the Caribbean who are building ventilators. So it provides a very, very ripe avenue, fertile avenue for students to really delve in. Education, I don't see education continuing in its traditional format anymore. Previously in Antigua and Barbuda, we had a limited number of persons who were interested in doing online and doing homeschooling. Now you have quite a number of persons who, because they have been doing it over the several months, maybe one parent is home and one parent is working. A number of parents already reach out and say, hey, I kind of like this. I want to get more involved in homeschooling. You also have a situation in Antigua and Barbuda where
you were telling me that there are parents who are willing to keep their children home full time.
Yeah. Despite I like you have seen the video where some parents, they pulled up in their car and kicked their kids out the back seat and took off. So I saw that video as well. But the reality is, there have been people who are interested in homeschooling, not just in Antigua and Barbuda, but across the world. Homeschooling is a big thing for whatever philosophical reason. So that will continue to grow. There are schools across the United States and the Caribbean who have offered internationally recognized diplomas. They have already formally reached out to the ministry to ask, so can we offer diplomas, American diplomas in Antigua and Barbuda to your students? And we apply for accreditation. we have decided to hold out for a little bit to allow our schools here in Antigua and
To do
Barbuda
the
to be able to do the
development,
same, to
please.
do develop
Thank
themselves and
you.
to be able to do the same. This morning, I spoke about us moving to a nationally recognized and standardized high school diploma, and we're doing this primarily because when you hear of, let's say, something like Khan Academy, they did not just develop overnight. They developed because they offered a globally recognized standard that they can trade off. Now, they are coming into economies across the world with in an aggressive way. And so we have at least one school in Antigua and Barbuda who's creating the physical premises for expansion to enable that same diploma to be offered fully online and to be internationally accredited as well. You also have a situation where ABS and the Ministry of Education, Science and Technology are aggressively developing now what's going to be the school television classes on television, where you have an actual teacher who's going to be delivering lessons on the television. And so we expect that to roll out shortly, especially with CXC coming up very shortly in
I have
in
I have
July.
a maths person in my house you might want to use for that program.
But that's what I'm saying. These programs are rolling out. So when you look at it, the reality is, Petra, the reality is education not only supports the economy by training persons, but education itself is an economic activity.
Indeed.
In the Caribbean, we have not been taught to see education as a business. But the truth is, education is a business. Not just when you look at everything that surrounds education and what goes along with it, from kindergarten go all the way up to the tertiary level, it creates a very vibrant economic activity. When you look any place across the world, including in Antigua and Barbuda, educational institutions spur economic growth. So even if we look, for instance, you have AUA, you have the University of the West Indies, Five Islands campus, you have Metropolitan University of Medical Sciences, and you have UHSA.
Yes, they're coming back on stream, I noticed.
They're coming back on stream. You have students attend these institutions. There's faculty that has to be paid. There are
Rental.
services that has to be provided. There are rentals, and there are rentals both in vehicles and rentals in terms of accommodation. And these people have to eat. They have to eat. They have to bathe. They have to change their clothes. They have to defecate. They have to go to the doctor. They have to do everything that humans normally do, and that generates an economic activity. So, that really drives. If you look at college towns across the United States, if those universities, colleges, or schools close, that's it. The town or city goes upside down.
Which brings me to 2 points I wanted to raise. One, in terms of we look at the AUA and the semi-town that develops around AUA. We've had the build-out of restaurants, we've had the build-out of housing, and so on. Because we're so small, of course, most of our commercial activities will take place within the city. But places like, for example, the supermarkets and so on, you have literally seen, I don't know how many persons would have noticed, but I have noticed that certain types of products that are just not moving when you go into the supermarkets, and then you realize that these products were catering heavily to our student population who came in for the med school and so on, and so you recognize the value that they brought in terms of the purchasing power to our consumption process. And if anybody has noticed that's why.
I think I would take it even further, Peter. Anybody at all, well, even the blind could see or the mute could hear or tell the economic benefits that comes from education tourism. It's an undebatable discussion. And now that AUA with this COVID crisis, and I know the last 2 flights of students, they went back home until the university can fully get back on its feet. And you see all the rent-a-cars that are parked up, here, there, and everywhere, all the apartments that are closed, or all the students who are unable to buy XYZ or support the different restaurants or so on. Or, it's a tourism. It's there. It provides an economic benefit. Even, for instance, when you look at our private schools, if parents unable to pay tuition on time,
Right.
or through some kind of payment plan. Think about the number of persons who are going to be employed. Think about the number of persons who have students both in public and private schools, and they themselves, because most times we tend to see kids at schools as a babysitting enterprise. Which is
Not
very
going down that
unfortunate.
road with
You
you.
know, when COVID-19 came along, a lot of parents were like, "What are we going to do with our kids?" The reality
But
is
it's a
that's
valid
not.
question because they have to
You see, but
work.
that's not education.
I'm not saying. Hold on, hold on. Remember
That's not
now.
education.
To be fair, yes, it may not primarily be education, but how the cycle works or the circle works is that I know that while I am at work, my children are safe at school. So now that now that I am returning to work, what happens to the children? Or, I'm not going to say babysitting, but when I need my sanity and peace and quiet for a few hours, where am I going to send my child? Remember, there's no formal classes. There are no opportunities for, with like the camps and so on. None of those things.
Petra,
I'm
the thing
just
is,
pointing
right?
out an example. But here's what we're not going to dwell on that because we're running short on time, ladies and gentlemen. You're listening to Eye on Our Economy, and I have Minister Michael Browne with me, and we're discussing education and the economy. Not in the traditional sense, once you hear Minister Browne, you're looking for certain things, but we're looking at education and the economy. Minister, the value of research. While we have several tertiary institutions across Antigua, we have not yet begun to fully immerse ourselves in that research culture. And I ponder at this time, with so many different things happening to us as a small island state, and being able to watch what's happening in larger economies, are we perhaps ripe for the development of a research culture?
If you
Quickly.
permit me to disagree with you just briefly, I wouldn't say that we're not engaged in research, because we actually are. As an oral culture, we have been engaged in research for quite a while. What we have not been able to do is commercialize the value of the research that we have been doing. Even when I did CXC, for instance, and I know I did something on religion, and I had to go to several different churches and do interviews with persons. That's research.
Okay, all right, hold on, wait.
I'm coming to that point. Coming to the college level.
Because
I wanted to create some
that
context
is
and
that is a
background.
good basis, but I'm talking about the research that impacts on our development. That is the research I'm talking about.
That's why I said I am providing the background.
Okay,
Because
go
the
ahead.
reality is, when students are engaged in the research, go to Princess Margaret, go to any secondary school across Antigua and Barbuda, public or private, and just pay attention to how students are engaged in home management, how they engage in food security, how they engage in agricultural science, and any other subject that pushes them beyond just studying for tests, but they're actually doing some form of research. Then that skill now is transferred to the college level. When they get to the college level now as a society, we're pretty new in terms of having tertiary institutions. AUA is
Yeah, but we're
actually
not new. But we're not new in terms of having people exposed to tertiary institutions.
that's what I say. In
No, I'm
terms
saying that
of
we are not
having
new in terms of people being exposed. We have been
that,
exposed in other places. So
that
I'm
is true.
wondering if we can
But
marry those who have done. Okay, let me give you an example. I think I know where you're going, and
I
I'm
think we're on
trying
the
to
same page. I think
Mhm.
what I'm trying to say though is that I believe that we are getting there. We may be moving a little bit lethargic, but I believe we're getting there. There's quite a number of research that is being done. Where I believe there's a shortage is in terms of, after I would have done this research, how do I get the information circulated? How do I implement what I would have researched? Or how do I generate economic activity over my research? I believe that's the deficiency that we have now, which I believe both in the public and private sector is currently being done. And the reality is, Petra, for that to continue to be done, I've heard you call a list of some of your upcoming guests. From time to time, I've seen either he or she comment on various things. Our generations that are coming forward, we're the ones now that have to take the talent that is there, take what we would have seen as not being completely developed from previous generations, and then to move it forward.
All right. Within that context, then let me put a question slash challenge in. The Prime Minister has already started, the work of the National Economic Recovery Council. That's the right name, right? The National
Yes.
Economic Recovery Council. The National Economic Recovery Council has commenced its work. Would you consider that it's a good opportunity for us to put within that council the fostering of that research culture? There is perhaps the development of a small think tank or research database that supports the work of the members of the various subcommittees of the council. My concern is, and I'm wondering if, as a point from pushing it from an education perspective, because I know, yes, you will have your hands full developing your education policy as part of the recovery process.
I have answered your question.
Yeah, you say, of course. So how do we move it forward? That's why you see, one of the things that I am concerned about that we do in this process. Let me answer
that question before you elaborate on it. Because you asked, how do we move it forward? You see, I realize you asked a lot of compound questions.
Yes.
I think how we move it forward is, I believe we're already in the process of moving it forward. For instance, listen to your program is called Eye on Our Economy. You have the Minister of Education as your first guest on Eye on the Economy to talk about the benefits of education. What we're doing now in having this conversation reminds me of the first time I spoke as chair of the advisory board for the Anti-Money Laundering Commission in Miami. And many of them, they looked and like, but he's the Minister of Education. First of all, why is he chair of our board and why is he talking to us about economics? And then after I gave that first talk and helped to put things in context in terms of education's role, I've been invited every year since then. The reality is your program is a part of that overall, I don't want to say DNA for political purposes, but your program, I'll
take it. Go ahead, no problem.
Some light moment. But I don't necessarily, but your program is already part of the vein of that discussion. Every radio station that you turn on, you hear that discussion taking place in both the public and private sector.
But do you think it's structured sufficiently? Do you think, because I don't think that my program is sufficiently structured. I raise it, but then it needs to go to that think tank. People get data, hard data, do proper analyses, and so on. That is what I'm thinking.
I don't necessarily know if I can flow smoothly with the structure of your question, if it's structured. Primarily because who am I to say whether or not the unearthing of intellectual capacity arrives at a key structure? I think what I would more focus on is our more and more developing ourselves to draw a distinction between an intellectual discourse that's factually based and spending too much time becoming pregnant with opinions. And I think that's one of the greatest challenges we have. Oftentimes, you find a lot of people, they bring just half-hearted opinions to a discussion, infused and disguised as if they're properly researched facts. No, they make no sense. And sometimes you need to just tell people, listen, you're chatting rubbish.
Exactly. So this is why we want to promote the culture of chatting sense.
I wouldn't necessarily say structure, but in terms of, I try not to engage myself in certain discourse that I believe is an exercise in futility. It's a waste of my time.
Noted.
There have been some persons who would call me and say, can you come on my show? No, I think your show is a nonsense show. It's a waste of time. So I wouldn't go because I believe it's a waste of time. There are persons who would, Peter, you know me, there are persons who would call, and I realize if you're a person who creates more problems in order to find solutions, that's just not for me. I neither have the professional, political, or personal space for it. But if I'm satisfied that...
I just feel like you just dropped someone for somebody. But carry on.
No, I would have said that. I would have said directly. I would have given you context and say, this is me about to drop someone.
All right. Okay. Fair enough.
Yeah. But I think overall, and the reality is with the advent of social media, every single person has elevated their opinion more than everybody else. We have a lot of bush experts. But I think fundamentally, whether we are on the same political side, the fact is, I want to hear what you're saying. I want to hear what my opponents are saying. I want to hear your discourse. I want to hear all the discourse so that for me, for instance, I'm in a position to make decisions that affect people's lives, or to advise the cabinet, or to dialogue with my technicians and be informed by them. But I want to hear the general fluency of the discourse so that I'm properly informed. And I think that openness to engage in factual, true, contextual debate is already a call for what you have been asking for. It's already begun.
Okay, fair enough. Noted. Now, I want to thank you very much for joining me. And as
Thank you for having me.
just as we wrap up, I have a little controversial-ish question for you. It's not controversial at all.
Okay.
Are we expecting schools to be open anytime soon? General question.
Well,
I don't want a
will
date.
say
I said soon.
we have just concluded. Regional consultations and meetings last week. The final two was the Ministers of Education meeting that was held on Thursday, and you had the COSAD meeting that was concluded on Friday, of which that's the CARICOM Ministers of Education, of which I currently sit as the chairperson.
Mm-hmm.
I think about 45 minutes or an hour or so before I started talking to you, I signed off on the final agreement of that meeting to be circulated with to ministers of education and national ministries of education across CARICOM. I signed off on the final declaration. And now in Antigua and Barbuda and across the region, we are now doing national consultations with our stakeholders so that we can determine in terms of how do we go forward in making preparations for students to do CXC and CAPE in July, and simultaneously what are some of the more realistic timelines for the phased reopening of schools. And I want to emphasize that, the phased reopening of schools. And so in Antigua and Barbuda, tentatively, we are looking now at, let's say, August 31st. We had looked at some other dates. It will not be finalized.
So you're saying that we're unlikely to return to the classroom before August the 31st?
I'm saying that we're doing national consultations now, and I would admonish persons to be patient until the Ministry of Education will make a formal statement. I know persons are eager and anxious, but let's not treat this as a medical emergency, but just allow the natural consultations to occur so that once a decision would have been made, we would have factored in all the possibilities.
And that it's going to be phased, not that we're anticipating that whatever the date is, that everybody rushes back into the classroom.
Well, the first phase, Petra, is going to have to be with preparing the student, the fifth formers, for CXC exams
right.
very, very shortly.
Right.
So that naturally is going to be the first phase. So you're talking about retraining persons. Let me give you an example. Cleaners have been trained to clean. Now they also have to be trained to sanitize as well, which is a completely different thing to just regular cleaning. You also have the Board of Education over the last several weeks have been going into several schools and doing additional work, such as increased hand washing stations, increased sanitization stations. So that work has already been done through the Board of Education, working collaboratively with the Ministry of Health. And so we have to ramp it up, especially depending on what the outcome is with the performers.
Okay. And what of the process? I heard you speak at length, and I've seen it in writing also, about the transition process from primary to secondary schools. That process. That process has commenced, I'm assuming, and it's ongoing as we move forward.
Yeah. Well, as you know, the sixth grade exams has been cancelled for this year, and I think quite rightly so. There's this. I think I'm going to put it up on my status very shortly. Whereas you have one child that's sitting in a house, he has television, he has internet, he has everything, and you have a next child who's outside looking in and trying to figure out what's going on. In order for us to be fair and ensure that we factor in the capabilities of all the students, we have cancelled the exams and we have come up with a new formula. For me to get into it now with the limited
No, I don't know.
time
Not the formula, because
exercising
that's what I'm
facility.
saying. You have already put it out there. I just wanted to know if the work has begun. That's all I wanted to know.
It's already begun. The work has already begun. And for those persons who are unfamiliar with the format, Petra, I will give my number again, and it's on my status now. My cell number is 464-2025. 464-2025. If you go on my status, you will see it clearly outlined there. And, before I go, Petra, and thank you and your team for having me on the program.
Thank you for joining us. You're my first minister ever, on any program.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you. It's quite an honor. But let me just use this opportunity to just give a heartfelt thank you and appreciation to educators and education officials overall. From the PS and her technical team, the Director of Education and his support team, going all the way down to the schools, especially the schools, the principals, school leadership, teachers, custodial staff, parent coordinators, secretaries, garden hands, everybody that has been working in education. I just wanted to say my hats off to them. Parents, you have been doing a phenomenal job transitioning and transforming yourselves to be teachers overnight. And I think that is a fundamental thing. And parents and students themselves. I mean, I've never lived in a pandemic. Peter, I'm quite sure you have never lived in a pandemic.
No, I don't want to live with another one after this either.
Yeah, they have an arduous responsibility, so they have adjusted themselves as well. And so I want to thank them all for doing what they've been able to do. And Petra, last but not least, as my soon-to-be constituent of All Saints West, you've been living there for a while, but we are waiting for you to transition formally. Let me just say a heartfelt good afternoon to my beloved constituents of All Saints West. As you know, I'm on the road and I'll be driving to the areas very shortly.
Well, I know you come up by me, so when you come up by me, then we can talk about my my transfer. Physically come up by me. However, that is not the...
I tend to focus my energies, and you know that once you're a registered constituent of All Saints West, I look forward to working for you.
But anyways, Minister Browne, we are sharing the ABCD information on the social media page now as we speak. So for those persons who are interested, in addition to checking with you via your number, which you've given quite a number of times, we also have it sharing on the social media page for the program, so persons can have a look there. And I want to thank you very much for sharing with us, as I think most persons who would have tuned in would appreciate that we are discussing the impact on the economy, and so we did not necessarily dwell on the inner workings and so on of the ministry, but rather to take a global look at how education contributes to an impact on for persons who may not be thinking along that line. We want to make sure we break it down so persons understand the economy. Minister Browne, thank you very much for participating, and I'll have you again sometime.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it. Beautiful.
All right. Ladies and gentlemen, there we had our first segment, and we spoke with Minister Browne and we discussed education and the impact on the economy. We are now going to take just a quick break as we transition over to our next segment.